Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Brian Cafferty and I'm a Data and AI Artificial Intelligence Enabler. And I use that title because I do two things. I do a lot of training and I also do consulting for data and AI, which includes anything with big data, etc. And in this discussion, I'm going to talk about something near and dear to my heart because I have years and years of experience with this, which is choosing a recruiter to help you in a job search. And I'm mostly focused really on the idea of a permanent job, though I have used recruiters both for contracts and permanent positions. So let me jump in, and today's mug is my Microsoft mug here. I've got a whole bunch now of mugs, kind of my thing. Let's jump in. I did want to let you guys know too, if you haven't already heard, I published a book recently called Master Azure Databricks, which Databricks is a platform built on top of Apache Spark by the writers of Apache Spark. So really cool. Apache Spark is a scaled out big data platform. I've got a lot of videos on that, so check them out. And it's the place really, the most popular big data platform for developing machine learning or data science pipelines that train models, et cetera, which is a very hot topic. And I wrote this book because there was nothing out there like it. So this book is a comprehensive resource. Databricks is a sort of user-friendly front end that wraps around Spark to make it easier and gives you a lot of bells and whistles. But 90% or 80% or so of the book is directly applicable just to Spark, like PySpark and Sparkly R, et cetera, covered. So it's really good that way. And it takes you from beginner to expert. I found that there was just nothing out there like this. Databricks, this is probably without any doubt, really the most comprehensive and really extensive book that really takes you that way. Using a use case, it guides you through and says this is how you would go from a project initiated in a company to a solution, actually building machine learning models, deploying them, and stuff like that. And I use things like Azure Machine Learning Services and Blob and SQL Server as the sort of integration platform. But again, it will also apply to other things. So if you're learning Databricks, check it out. It's on Amazon. Actually, I priced it low to make sure people could afford it, so that help you on your journey. Back to our story. So where are we going in this particular discussion? I'm going to talk about when you should use a recruiter, which may not be always, right? What to look for when you do use a recruiter. Red flags and things to avoid, problems with these recruiters, and how to deal with them effectively. I'm also going to mention something here which are a little bit of misunderstandings and myths about recruiters. I want to start by saying that a recruiter relationship is a business relationship. And I have come over the years to realize that business relationships and intimate, relationships, your partner, etc., are really very, very similar. So much so that the same rules apply. And the most important rule, for instance, would be trust, right? You have to trust and work with another person. And if you can't get that past that, not only would it not work in an intimate relationship, right, but it wouldn't work in a business or even an employer-employee relationship. So that's a good kind of way to conceive of how this whole thing should go. Now, being that this is not my usual technical subject, if you say print or, A equal 5, A is equal to 5, and if I add numbers, it's going to be a concrete result. This is truly my wisdom, if that exists, from years and years of experience, but really it's come from success and failures in dealing with recruiters. And so I'm going to share with you what I used in my own roles. So this is actually hard-earned, many years. A lot actually harder to earn than just learning technical knowledge. So I hope it's useful to you. So when should you use recruiter? Really, when time is of the essence is when I would do it. For instance, if you've had situations where you suddenly find you got laid off, right? In economic times like this, it's not unlikely for a lot of people. They can help get you on track, maybe give you some good advice like getting your resume together, but they can get you moving and get you opportunities potentially faster than on your own. So when time is really critical, you're not just kind of like, I'll take my time, I'll look around. That's a good idea. Often this means you're unemployed. So again, now if you caught flat-footed, you got laid off, you didn't have a resume, you haven't had a job in 10 or more years, you might feel like, where do I begin? What do I do? I think recruiters are really good at that point because they can calm you down. They can say, look, this is what you want to do. And hopefully they can, get you in front of people. Now, if you're currently employed and you are working for a place for a long time, I do advise get to, connected with good recruiters, following my list, following my advice, because it is good to have these business partners in your back pocket, if you will, or somebody you can fall back on that will help you when you need it. You don't have to be looking. And recruiters are pretty good. They don't usually harass you and say, you've got to take a job. They like to have resources also. So it's good that way. The key is you need help getting interviews. So those are the times, like, again, you haven't been working a long time, you're rusty at all of this. Again, it's kind of like the dating, right? I haven't dated in years. Well, similar kind of thing here. You need some help. So think of them like that, romantic relationship coach and broker, getting you there. So you need some help getting interviews, and that's where I think they can really help. Now, I reflected on this and said, when have I actually used recruiters? In my career, I think a little under half the jobs I've gotten have been with recruiters. And it's always come up a specific way, which is a recruiter that I honestly didn't have a relationship with emails me or calls me and says, I saw your resume, I saw your LinkedIn profile, you're a perfect fit for X. Now, mind you, 80% of the time, 90% of the time, the recruiter that says that is looking at an accounting job or a underwriter, and I'm an IT person. So they may not have that right. But every now and then, somebody calls you and stuff and says, this is a perfect fit for you. And they're really experienced, and they are right, and they really have the job, and it just comes together. And here's a key thing that I haven't said, unfortunately, enough in here about job searching, and I'm going to do something on that. But when jobs are really meant to happen, they tend to come together really easily. It's like romantic relationships. You always hear, if you have someone, you may have found that you were struggling to find someone, and then suddenly it just came together, and you're like, yeah, this person's really easy to be with. Yeah, it's work, but it just seems to work. It makes sense. And that's how I think all jobs really are, at least for me. Whenever I try to force a job opportunity, when I know in my heart it wasn't the right one, it never worked. But whenever it just seemed to connect, it was a really good opportunity, it worked, and recruiters have had some help in some of those opportunities where it was a really good fit. So that's where I tend to use them. It just comes up, I do all my filter criteria. I'm going to teach you now my top tips, but yeah, that's a good way to sort of see this. So the idea with recruiters is they expand your reach. They see things. They have opportunities and connections into companies, etc. You don't. And it's good to tap into that. I'll talk about, you don't have to use them, but they can definitely expand your reach and therefore your effectiveness. So what do I look for in a recruiter? The most important thing I look for in any relationship is trust. And trust is built on integrity. Is this person somebody I can actually rely on? Will they do what they say they're going to do? So that's the first thing. They say they're going to call me. Do they call me, right? Not the I'll call you next week and you never hear them kind of thing. No, they say I'll call you tomorrow. They call you tomorrow. They say they'll call you on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. They say they'll give you, the job description. They'll email this to you. They do what they say they're going to do. And they're accurate. They're correct. So they have enough integrity to make sure that whatever they tell you, the salary, what the job is about, etc., is correct. These things may take time. It's not always obvious right away, but if you start to see these things are happening where they're not really being forthright, then you have a problem. And that's my number one, mind you, red flag, and I will disconnect from recruiters who aren't somebody I can trust. The other thing is experience. So there are a lot of people out there, they're getting out of college, things like that, and they end up working as a recruiter. It's their first job. And honestly, like anything, they may not work out. They may not like it. So when I see, somebody on LinkedIn or somebody wants to connect with me and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about jobs, and I see that their last job 3 months ago was working at IHOP as a food server, it's not going to work because I'm a senior level person and I'm not confident that somebody who with that level of experience is even going to know what I do, let alone help me find a job. So I definitely filter out that. Now, admittedly, some people would say, well, they usually bump things up, as I've seen, to more senior people, but I just don't have a lot of time for this kind of process. So I wish them well, but I don't really have time to work with them. So I look for at least 5 years of experience. Preferably, if I see someone connect with me who's a recruiter and they have like 20 years in recruiting, that to me is a huge win, because I'm like, okay, they know this game. They know how it works. And if it's, and they know my field, IT, then I'll talk to them. They don't always even get the final point results, but if they're really good and I like them and can work with them, I'll keep them in sort of my short list of recruiters. And I have a short list. I have certain recruiters I like to work with. Results is the final thing. What does results mean? One thing only. One thing only. Do they get you interviews? I accept my responsibility as a potential employee that I have to bring it. I have to have my act together. I have to have answers to questions. I need the recruiter at times to get my foot in the door, to pitch me to the customer. After that, they've done what they can do. I mean, sure, they can coach you, they can, advise you on things, but they can't sell you. You have to sell you. That means, make sure the resume won't sell you, by the way. The resume gives somebody really something like a score sheet they can look at and ask you questions, but you have to be there and razzle dazzle the potential employer with just how great you are. And don't expect the recruiter to do that, because that's really unfair for them. And you have to also sell yourself to the recruiter. If they see like you're good, you not answer questions, you're very confident, you know what you're doing, they're going to want to pitch you as well. And so I make sure recruiters realize, like, all I want you to do is get me in there. I will sell myself. All right. What's the problem with using recruiters? This is it in a nutshell. This is the only problem I have with using recruiters. I mean, yeah, they can misrepresent you and things, but in my world, my time is money. I do consulting. I charge an hourly rate. So if you waste an hour of my time, that's money out the window. More importantly, when you're searching for a job, you've got a lot going on. It's a difficult task. You need to be effective and efficient. So wasting your time is not going to help you. And unfortunately, many, I would say at least 90%, 95% maybe of recruiters tend to waste your time. Not because they want to. I don't think they think they're wasting your time, but they don't know all the things going on that you need and what you're looking for. And so they will talk to you and do things, and after a while, you realize, like, this just never went anywhere. So what are the red flags? Well, the first thing I want to say is, and I put this on a separate slide so I don't forget to mention, something I discovered early on is there's a sort of recruiter I call bottom feeders. These are recruiters who actually are not recruiters. They're more like scammers. And they tend to use web scraping, and they go into sites like Indeed.com and Monster.com, which unfortunately have become more not very useful websites because they just have gotten like massive inundation. It's kind of like the low-end websites now, where they just they don't get the best jobs anymore. And so these bottom feeders do web scraping, wrap up this stuff, will typically either send you an email, it's like, hello sir, I'm Adam, and pitch you some job. Sometimes they'll even call you. They get your number and they call you. The things you'll realize quickly, and I first didn't, and so the first thing I said was, well, okay, I asked the salary, or in this case it was a contract, what's the rate? And it was like half of what I would have expected anybody to be making. And that's because they're usually somewhere out in like India, in a place where they've got a lot of people doing this sort of scraping and then just calling people like en masse. They don't know the employer. There's no connection, so they won't be able to really enter anything specific about the job, and that's a red flag. And they usually want to lowball you because they're trying to make a big spread. So they want to bring you in cheap, and then they'll try to get a higher rate. Then they make all the money. And I saw some really sad stories online. Mostly people needing like the H-1B visas and things, who needed help to stay in the country, and they fell into this. They got sucked in, and they ended up getting locked into problems and all kinds of things with these bottom feeders. So be careful. Again, this is where the trust. Don't work with somebody. Don't give them information and stuff until you know them. If ever there was a time in the world where that holds true, it's now. The other red flag, which is much not so bad, right? Hold on. Is they insist on meeting with you. Now, this used to happen a lot, a little less now, but that typically is also the less experienced recruiters. Like, hey, I'm 3 months on the job, got to get it there and write up how I talk to people. And that's great for them, but it's wasting your time. You don't need to talk to someone unless there's an opportunity that you're actually working on. And preferably, it's not to just your recruiter. You want to be talking to the employer. Now, I get that they want to talk to you maybe for 5 or 10 minutes, but they don't need to do a full interview with you. And again, if they're not very experienced, then it's not really very effective. I mean, you don't need to be telling someone like, my ideal job is, and if the world were perfect, this is what I do. It's really not helping you. If you want to do that for your own social benefit or something, feel free, but it's not really going to help you. The key thing is, if they have no concrete job opportunities, so this is the first thing I ask, because they like to connect. They want to build up an inventory of people they can potentially, place in jobs, but they don't have a job opportunity, at least not one that fits you. So I write out, do you have something? Oh yeah, we get things all the time. No, I didn't ask you, do you get things all the time? Is there something you have now for me? That's it. And then you might get that, well, nothing specific right now. And you say, okay, thank you. Well, let me know when you do. Simple. All right. If they do, by the way, say they have a job opportunity, make sure they send you an actual job description. Now, they may not share the employer, and that's fair, but it should be a very detailed job description that you would typically see. And I'll tell you why. Because many times the companies actually have not approved the job requisition. And that's a very necessary formal process in any company where they get the budget money. So you could be going through loops and talking to them and even talking to the employer. I actually went all the way through to an in-person follow-up interview for a contract where they brought me in and talked to me and said, and they had finally admitted, like, yeah, it's not a formally signed, but it will be signed tonight. The person was out of the office. And the next day I got a call from the recruiter. Yeah, they never signed it. Turns out that person said, no, we don't have approval for that. So I was all set thinking I had a job, and I got shot down. And I wasted like a few days worth of effort doing this. And I thought it was a done deal. So don't believe it. Detailed job descriptions are usually the result of a requisition. You can't like get a copy of the requisition. That would be nice. But seeing it, if you don't get a job description that is specific, these are the requirements, how many years experience, etc., and job ranges, etc., then you know you have a red flag. They balk at your salary or other requirements. And by the way, somewhere in there, I hope I said this, make sure right up front you tell them your salary range. Like when they start saying, hey, we got a great job, it's perfect, you might just assume, and unfortunately I've done this more times than I can count, and it's always a mistake. I assume that since this is a senior level sounding job, it pays in my range. And then I find out it pays like half of what I make. And basically they're asking for way more than they have any right to get for the salary they're paying. And they won't get somebody that has the skills, but that's okay. But you need to filter that out soon. So make sure you always check, does this fall into my salary range? Okay. Now, oftentimes recruiters will balk at your salary requirements, or maybe location requirements, like, oh, come on, you can drive 1,000 miles a day. What's the problem? They're not really oftentimes interested in your issues. They just want to place you in the job. So the thing to understand with this is, if they're balking at your salary requirements or any other things that you think are important, the type of work you'll do, then you want to be careful. That's a trust thing. And I would step back and seriously question what you're doing, but make sure you just firm and say, look, that's my salary requirements. If it's something they can't meet, that's fine. Now you're like, oh no, we'll present it. As soon as you hear this sort of will present it, it probably means that they know they're not going to be able to place you at that rate because the job isn't really at your level. But they wish you would go for it because that would make it easier for them. They flatter you. Again, you get back to the sort of romantic relationship. Oh, you have such beautiful eyes, whatever. It's a similar kind of thing in recruiting. Your skills are amazing. You're like, wow, you're like the Tom Brady, or whatever, all these things. Flattery is never a good sign. It's nice to give, appreciation things like, wow, you have great experience. That's cool. But when it gets to be too much flattery, it's not good. So that's a sign of you can't trust somebody always. So how do I deal with recruiters? First of all, I only respond. In other words, I only engage with them if there is a concrete opportunity. I have a lot of people hit me up a lot of times on LinkedIn that don't meet my criteria, like experience, and they'll message me usually saying, hey, I want to connect. And I say, do you have a specific opportunity, and what is it? And I try to do a little pre-filtering because honestly, you can have spinning cycles, but also I have a sort of sense of duty that if you get a recruiter getting onto my network, then they're not only going to hit me, but then they can hit up everybody on my network. And there's a point where you want to make sure that you only have good recruiters, at least if they're going to be doing that, not somebody who's just hitting everybody up and kind of not adding value. Ask the salary range up front as soon as you can. First make sure the job fits, but then get us. And I usually typically will try to do this in more of an email if I can. I avoid discussion in Zoom or a phone or whatever until I have certain basics that there's something here to pursue. Again, because that's wasting time. Be candid, be direct. Don't be mean. Be appreciative. Thank you so much. How you doing? I try to be pleasant and nice to everybody I deal with, but it's business and I need to be direct. Like, look, I'm sorry, but I don't have time to go talk to you in person. And I don't have time to sort of maybe talk to this particular person even on a job because I think I need to talk to somebody else or whatever. Usually I'll talk to the person on the job if it's a fit. But if they say, but I might say, look, I got to be honest with you, that's not nearly what I'm looking for salary. I had been raised in a time when they said, don't talk about salary early on because that's a turnoff. Well, it should be because you have certain requirements. So I'm direct. Now, if they fail on integrity, I disconnect and move on. It's not an option. If I can't trust you, I don't even care that you can get me the job because I've got to rely on you to negotiate with my potential employer. I've got to rely on you representing me clearly and fairly. And this is, again, a business relationship. So if you fail on integrity, I disconnect and move on. And finally, we don't trust ourselves in us as people. We tend to be like, always give someone a second, third, fourth chance. I don't do that because most of the time people are very quick at revealing how they really operate. So if there's red flags, I'm okay if I make a mistake now and then, and maybe I should have given someone more chances. I trust my instincts. I do what I think I need to do. I move on and don't look back. Maybe I've missed some opportunities. I'm sure I probably have. But this is, again, like dating. You do that in dating. You could be dating someone for 3 years. Oh, maybe a little longer, Brian. Maybe this will work out. But do you really want to be wasting 3 years to do that? So, again, trust your instincts. Now, I want to talk about a few things that are sort of myths that I held a long time about recruiters. The number one myth that I always thought was that they have special insight into the job market. It just makes sense, right? You think they're seeing all these jobs and everything going on, so they must know, like, what are the growing trends in the industry? Like, what's the hot thing to know? Is it Databricks and Spark? Is it Python? But, data and AI at least. R programming? Is it web development, mobile apps? Like, what are people really looking for these days? And the truth is, they're not. You got to think more in terms of this is an assembly line, and this person typically is just looking at what's in front of them. So when you ask them questions, if you're trying to get that kind of insight, they don't know. And they'll say, well, I've got this Python job over here and Scala over here. But it's very narrow. Like they just don't have that scope. The other thing is they typically don't have a very big view of jobs anyway. They really only know what's going on right now. So you'd have to get somebody who's unusual in the recruiter and somebody definitely with a lot of experience and at a more managerial level who might have some insights like that. But most recruiters don't. The other thing that's really interesting, understand that when you see job postings, that posting has probably been one job posted 50 times. And I kid you not. Which means, and that's why it makes me like, wow, that job looks very similar. There's 50 jobs out there right now for a Python developer in my neighborhood. Well, no, there's one. And different recruiters, different posting services end up reposting the same job. A lot of times recruiters, big recruiting companies will post the description as sort of this is the kind of thing we offer. So you got to be really careful. Also, they oftentimes will do just that. They'll say, I've done this with the recruiter and said, oh, that job sounds a good fit. That's the kind of thing we have, but that was placed. It's a non-existent job. And you've chased after it and it's a phantom. So be careful. They don't have that many job postings. In fact, as I've worked with recruiters, I realize they all have their certain niches and they have certain jobs. Many jobs will end up being at the same, at many different recruiters. Very often, in fact, if a big employer in, say, downtown Boston suddenly comes up with a data architect or senior role, you'll suddenly find that 5 or 6 recruiters all have it at the same time and are all hitting you for the same job. So what I do in a case like that is, if I want to go through a recruiter at all, I will pick the one that I trust, the one that I have a relationship with, and not the others. Okay, but be careful because that's a myth. They don't have tons and tons of postings typically, and obviously the larger ones may. The other thing that's really a myth, and it's painful at times, is many recruiters have no idea at all what you do, and that's another reason why people who have had 3 months in the area are really at a bad position. They don't know what you do. I do software engineering. I've gotten lots of recruiters who hit me up and say, you got great underwriting experience. It's like, I worked in an insurance company. I've never done underwriting. You should be you're in it. Or they think I'm an accountant. I don't know how they get that, but I've had that. But even people who have experience and have been placing people, just to bear in mind, they don't understand what you do. They're salespeople or brokers, whatever you want to call it. They try to understand what you do. I've got user groups and some of them will come and watch the presentations and try to get a handle on the kinds of things. But they're placing people. They're not doing what you do. So I'm okay with that, but you just have to understand that you're the one responsible to figure out if this job really is a good fit for you and to find out enough about it. They should be able to get you specific answers, but don't be surprised if they don't really understand what you do and they can't distinguish a DBA from a data engineer from a web developer. It's not surprising. The other thing to understand is they don't work for you. If they did, you'd pay them money. So they're not working for you. I guess technically you'd say they're working for the employer. But I tend to think they're more like brokers. They want to place jobs, and because most of the time they're not an exclusive, person to find a person for the employer, they aren't really working for the employer either, although they get paid typically by the employer. Big companies like Google and Microsoft, they do have dedicated people that are kind of extensions of them. Like Microsoft has sort of dedicated recruiters. So they are working for that company. They are, think of it that way. They're not working for you. So just bear that in mind. The final thing is, the myth is you need them. You don't. I've gotten many jobs without recruiters. I've gotten jobs with recruiters. I don't use them because I think I need them. I use them because when I do correctly, they get results. And they sometimes get better results than I can. I have had some really good job opportunities that I don't think I would ever even have known about if it hadn't been for recruiters who hit me up and said, Brian, and they didn't even know me. I mean, I'm thinking of one that I had a while back that really turned into a good learning opportunity as a job that I never would have even known about had it not been for this particular recruiter who had a deep relationship with the company in question. So they can be helpful, but you don't have to have them. Wrapping up. So we talked about when to use a recruiter, and again, it's as an augmentation type of thing and helpful, especially when you need to turn things around quick and you need help getting interviews. So that's when I tend to use them, or when something comes up that just looks like a good opportunity and the recruiter passes all the bells and whistle checks. What do I look for in a recruiter? That I can trust them, number one. That they do what they say they're going to do, etc. Number two, they have a lot of experience. The more experience, the better. I didn't say this, but typically I also look for people who are local. I don't really want to work with a recruiter in Australia. I don't even want to work with a recruiter in New Jersey. I prefer to work with a recruiter in the Boston area for my jobs. With the sort of working from home thing, that's become less of an issue, but I still pay attention to it because there's a market, there's a niche, and I tend to work in this region. I talked a lot about what red flags and what to avoid. Number one thing to avoid, beyond making sure you can trust them, that they actually have a job, the job's real, they have a requisition, is to just not waste your time. And don't let them, convince you to waste their time. Sure, it's a lot of fun to have a beer and chat, but it's not productive. The problem with using recruiters is one only thing: they waste time, and they can. And I talk about how to deal with recruiters, which in my books is just be direct, be nice, be kind, be direct, but only work with them. And like any relationship, let it evolve to the point where you get a good relationship and you trust them. I have a short list of recruiters that if they called me and they said, I've got this opportunity, I would listen and I would be happy to work with them if it seems like a good fit and a good opportunity. And I think, in this case, these recruiters, we know each other well enough that they're comfortable, like, yeah, Brian will be able to do it. They know if they get my foot in the door, I'm going to sell myself. And that's really important. That's what they want to see. Like, that's what they look for in you, because they're looking also and evaluating you. Are you going to make them look bad? Are you going to be able to get the job? They don't want to waste time either. So when you get a short list of recruiters, which I do advise you develop, then especially in permanent jobs, I think recruiters are extremely helpful if you can develop good ones in permanent jobs. But do it beforehand, because you really don't want to wait until you're out of a job scrambling. Then you're not necessarily going to be able to find good recruiters that easily. It took me a long time to get a short list, so consider that. Thank you for watching this. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you disagree, if you agree, nicely, of course. We always like to be polite. But yeah, I think it's good. I hope this has been helpful. I'm intending to do some other things too about like recruiting, how to find a permanent job, etc., because I have got a lot of experience in this, and I think some professional advice type of things might be useful, and I hope it is. So please subscribe, like, and let other people know about my channel. I love getting out there and seeing that people are actually getting some benefit from what I'm talking about. Thanks. Take care.